To defer or not to defer law school? That seems to be the question of the summer. With COVID-19 and many law schools holding classes virtually this fall, I know many of you are contemplating this. So in today's video, I will cover a few things to consider in making your decision on whether it's personally the right decision for you to defer for a year. Now, if you're already set on attending law school this fall or already a law student, I also have some exciting news for you. In the next few weeks, I plan to cover how to crush your 1L year, learn about the legal recruiting landscape, prepare for interviews, and otherwise get ready for the practice of law. Also, for those of you who just graduated college and you're trying to decide if law school is the right choice for you, I will put together some materials on how to make that decision, as well as how to put together a winning application. So please join the YouTube family by subscribing to our channel and make sure you turn on the bell right next to it so you'll get a notification when we have a new video. With that, let's get to today's video. First, you should not defer if your decision is driven by one or both of the following. First, you are thinking of deferring law school out of just the fear of the market crashing. It is absolutely fruitless and futile to try to predict the unpredictable. Even economists don't know how to deal with this. COVID-19 is extremely unprecedented. So to try to figure out what's going to happen in 3 years, it's going to drive you to make decisions out of fear and out of the unknown. Let's think about it. People who graduated class of 2009 and because of the crash, their postgraduate jobs went away or they got delayed for a year. They started law school when I graduated in 2006 when the market was super hot. Also, even though that was a really rough year for them, many of them in the next year, just fast forward 1 year, they were able to find really great jobs. Some of these guys are now senior counsel at prominent companies like Google. So, let's think about class of 2020. These guys just graduated. Just last year, they raised starting salaries twice, from 160 to ultimately 190, and they were giving bonuses and all kind of lucrative stuff. So we don't know what's going to happen in 1 year, let alone in 3 years. So if the only reason you're now doubting your decision and you're going to give up on your dream of going to law school is out of market fears, I don't think you should defer. The second thing is you should not defer if you don't have at least a somewhat exciting plan for the next 12 months. I understand with social distancing stuff, maybe there's not a lot of exciting things you can do, but you should have a plan on how you're going to spend the year. But if you're going to spend every week or every month worrying about, things are not calming down, what if things are still not normal next summer, what if it's still going to be virtual, and if you're going to spend the next year just stressing out and worrying about what's going to happen, then that's also not a good reason to sit this one out. Okay, so now let's say neither one of those categories apply to you. You're not thinking of deferring just because you're fearful of the market, and if you were to defer, you would have a somewhat exciting plan of how to spend your time instead of just worrying. So in that case, let's consider some factors that you should, pay attention to if, deferring is something that is on your mind. The first category I would think about is, are you sure about being a lawyer? Some people, because they can't find a job with their undergraduate degree or another graduate degree, or they don't like sciences to go to medical school, or they think they need math for business school, they just decide to go to law school as a default kind of thing. Or they got excited about being a lawyer based on something they saw on TV. So if you're not 100% sure about something that is a huge time and money and emotional investment, maybe deferring for a year is a good idea. So you can sit down and investigate this properly to see what the daily lives of lawyers are like, and based on that, you make a decision to ultimately go or not. The second category I would consider in whether or not I would ultimately decide to go or defer is, how physically safe do I feel? So for those of you who took a psychology class in college, you probably are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you know that at the very bottom is going to be your physical safety. So if the school at which your law school is located and you're going to go there, or the city you are going to take your classes virtually is a COVID-19 hotspot and you're really worried about that, or you are opting for the mix virtual versus in person, and every time you have to go run an errand, you're really going to be super freaked out about somebody coughing, or maybe some people in the community are not wearing masks. Of course, we're all worried about that, but you know yourself best. If you were naturally a little bit more cautious and germaphobe before this happens, you want to think about this, because if your mental bandwidth is going to that physical safety, you might not be able to function on the level we need you to function to emotionally sustain through law school. The third category is your particular learning style. Until you get to this point, you've done well. You did well in high school, you took standardized exams, you did well in college, you took the LSATs, most of you, so you know what works for you and what does not. If you naturally thrive on being around people and learning in that way, you should think about this. You should also consider that law school is not just so much about learning the content, but it's also the process. Now, I don't agree with many things law schools do and the way they've been teaching for 200 years, but there's one thing they do really well, especially at the top law schools. They reprogram your mind through outlining and meeting with professors and the Socratic methods and the way the exams are done, and law firms coming on campus to train you to think like a lawyer. So with those things not being able to happen the same way virtually, you might want to think, does that help or hurt your particular learning style? Also, I want you to keep in mind that as big of an effort this institution, these law schools are going to make, and as brilliant as your professors are, for many of them, this is the very first time they're going to teach these courses, civil procedure, contracts, criminal law, virtually. The first time I made the speech, the first time I made a YouTube video, it was a little rougher than the 10th time I did it. It's still a work in progress on some of these categories, but the more we do something, no matter how brilliant we are, no matter how talented we are, we get better at it. So I'm absolutely certain that for most of your professors and most law schools, the quality of instruction is going to take a hit. One, because virtually is always challenging, and two, because they've never done it like that before. It might still be good enough to master the subject and become a lawyer, but if you particularly need certain aspects of learning, you should consider deferring for a year, because for you it might make sense to not impose these additional hurdles to your learning style, especially if there are no tuition concessions for this new system of learning. The fourth category I would suggest you to consider is your technology tolerance. Now, I know we're all a little zoomed out, but if you go to a virtual event, I wish it was in May when we had all our virtual conferences so I could invite you to those, but if you just show up to a virtual conference and for like an hour, for 2, for 3, for 4, how do you do? Can you make yourself retain the information by taking notes and using other techniques to keep your attention alert? Because if your technology tolerance is very low, law school classes are going to be even more challenging. A lot of the law school subjects are dry. The way law school is taught is dry. So keep that in mind. My friends who are gamers and or in any way affiliated with computer science, they've done very well in the pandemic because the virtual world, learning that way, presenting that way is not new to them. Whereas others who sure use technology, but they prefer things a different format, have a harder time keeping their attention span. So consider how you do personally. If you don't know, there are a lot of events that are going on, sometimes week-long boot camps, sometimes shorter ones. And if you attend them and just see how well you did with the technology, and if you did well enough, we can then talk about some other tools you can incorporate to make the exhaustion from technology less. But if it's absolutely intolerable to you, these virtual events, law school classes will probably be worse. And last but not least, do you have a plan to emotionally sustain, through law school, through the new challenges of law school? Think about what your plan will be. Like, if you're going to go to law school, do you have a plan how you can emotionally and physically keep you positive, how to still network, how to still keep your joy and excitement about this really exciting new chapter in your life? Because if you don't, we need to come up with one. So, if you're going to law school, you can still do well. But if you absolutely don't, but you are super excited about possibly deferring and being able to emotionally sustain that way, then you should weigh this criteria in making your decision. Ultimately, this comes down to a personal decision for every single person. And if you end up making a decision, but then in a couple of weeks, in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, at any point you feel like you need to change your mind, it's okay. Many people pivot. I've known friends who did 1 year of law school at Harvard and then they decided to take a year off with the possibility to never go back. But they ended up going back refreshed and they did amazing and they are prominent lawyers. So don't be so rough on yourselves. Make the best decision you can. Consider the criteria you were thinking about, and I hope some of mine were useful to you. And then if you end up thinking, you made the wrong decision, communicate that to your institutions. Be frank and forthcoming and pivot to something else that makes sense for you. Until we meet again, stay well. And if this was helpful to you, please do me a favor and hit the like button. And if there are any topics, any questions you have, comment. I will read every single one of them and I will respond.